Stefan Verstappen, welcome to the Gnostic Media Podcast. It's good to have you here.
Well, it's good to be on, Jan. I really appreciate you having me on your show.
Well, we did an episode on psychopaths week before last, and wanted to have you on as sort of a follow-up to the psychopath episode. As what are some of the key things to defend ourselves, and how do we recognize them, etc. And you're sort of someone who's done a lot of work in that area, so I'm glad to have you here.
Well, thank you very much. First thing I'd like to explain is that I am not a psychologist. I'm not an expert in the field. I approach it more from a layman's point of view because it's something that I've learned through life and then through a lot of research. And I think what I'm trying to do is communicate this information to people through a non-clinical venue. So instead of reading books on psychology, which is going to turn a lot of people off, I included it in a book on self-defense because that's what you need to know. You need to know your enemy, like Sun Tzu says. And so I think by offering the information through a non-clinical rather and through a self-defense venue, that it'd be more approachable for people, that they'll be able to pick it up more easily.
Indeed. Why don't we have you start off by telling the audience about yourself, your background, etc.
Well, I've been sort of like an emergency survival expert for a long time. I graduated from an Outward Bound program for 3 years. It was the best thing they ever taught me in school because for 3 years they took us out into the woods and they taught us wilderness survival, how to shoot a gun, how to fix a canoe, how to portage and orienteering, how to rappel off of cliffs. It was amazing. But they made a mistake, meaning the educational system, because they instilled in me a sense of self-reliance ever since. And so from that point on, I always said to myself, I can do it myself. And that includes thinking for myself. And I kind of backfired on them because I'm pretty sure the educational system did not intend for people to come out being self-reliant and self-sufficient. But that stuck with me my whole life. And I've done a lot of different things. I worked for St. John Ambulance. I worked on the emergency disaster reenactment drills that they would have with the county, and they would shut down a couple of blocks in the city, and fire and ambulance would come out, and we would even have the victims all dressed up as, with realistic makeup on, and so did that for a while. And then I went to China to study Kung Fu. I'd always been interested in martial arts. I got into it early because of my interest in, of all people, Gurdjieff. I'm sure you're familiar with his work, eh?
Sure. Yeah, he's a little bit on the New Age side, but,
Yeah, the thing that intrigued me about Gurdjieff was, his concept that you could, achieve enlightenment not just through meditation, but actually through movement. And so that's why I investigated martial arts. I thought that was a way of recreating the movement. There was something to it. Anyways, long story short, I ended up in China for 4 years studying under, by complete fluke that I met these men. It was purely accident. I didn't even know who I was learning from until months later. But two of the most famous Kung Fu masters in China. And when I came back to Toronto, I taught for a while. I did the Israeli commando stuff, the Krav Maga. We did mixed martial arts. Long before it became popular, we were already, full contact sparring, no rules except for biting and crotch grabbing. We did weapons sparring, full contact. We had, the body armor, the motorcycle helmets, the rattan sticks. So, I enjoyed that. And So it was, I first started writing the book when I was teaching martial arts because I taught a lot of, self-defense courses, women's self-defense courses. And what everybody always wants to know is, well, teach me, two or three techniques that I can kill somebody and escape a situation and, I'll feel confident. And, I can teach you a couple of things, but to be honest with you, and for me, the truth is always more important than my own personal comfort level. So, there's a lot of nonsense in martial arts. If you go to most schools and you read the philosophy and, what they think they can do and what they can really do, it's two different worlds. They live in a fantasy world, real combat, real street fighting. It's nasty, it's dirty, it's ugly. And even though a self-defense course will give you confidence, and that confidence by itself will discourage attackers because remember, street criminals will look for an easy target. And studies have found that if you take a self-defense course, you're less likely to be attacked, even though the chances are if you are attacked, you're no better at fighting the attacker off than somebody that didn't have the course. But it's your presence that discourages them.
When I was in my early 20s, I sold door to door for the LA Times and stuff. And
that's rough.
yeah, it is rough. And, but the money was really pretty decent. And back then you could actually work part time and make a living at it.
Mm-hmm.
And my favorite neighborhoods were often these gang type neighborhoods. And, whenever I saw the gangs eyeballing me, I would just turn right towards them and walk up to them and say hi and start talking to them. And
Yeah.
I didn't have any self-defense techniques. That was my self-defense technique. And, it worked every time.
Yeah.
And they, because they would be eyeballing me, I could see that they were getting ready, sizing me up.
Sure.
But when I approached them, it disarmed them and it threw things off to when they're, what are you doing in this neighborhood? It's not safe for you. You could get attacked, yada, yada. And then suddenly they were warning me about all of the stuff that could go on in a neighborhood. But, those were actually my preferred neighborhoods, and not only that, but the poor families almost always fed you dinner. So,
Yeah.
whereas in the rich neighborhoods, you never got dinner, right? So, you leave these poor neighborhoods fed, feeling good. You'd meet interesting people, and it was always an interesting learning experience. Starting off into your book here, your first quote in your book, your first line, you're quoting Sun Tzu: "Know your enemy and know yourself, and you will win all battles." What is the significance of this quote in understanding the psychopath?
Well, the primary predator of human beings in our society are psychopaths. We no longer being, attacked by wild animals. And yet, nature is not foiled. You can't escape the laws of nature. So for every herd animal, there is going to be a certain percentage of predators. Human beings were, part herd, part pack animal. And nevertheless, there's going to be a certain percentage of predators. And the predators of humanity are psychopaths. And I think they come in sort of like two types. The low-level, low-intelligent type of psychopath who ends up being the career criminal, the mugger, the rapist. And then there's the high level, the educated, the higher IQ, the wealthier psychopath who ends up becoming the head of, corporations or a church or your political leader. And they're the ones that prey on you. So in order to escape becoming a victim, you need to know your enemy. And who's the enemy of mankind? It's the psychopath.
All right, here's a really good question for you. What is a psychopath?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we can define them by their characteristics, even though all humans will share those characteristics or some of those characteristics
Right.
to some degree.
And one thing, let me just interject, is the average person might have one or two or three of these things that a psychopath might have, but a psychopath would actually have far more of them. And I actually worked for someone in Los Angeles who, and we'll talk about this in a second, when we read the list of things that are typically attributed to psychopaths, this guy had every one of them.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, we all have, foibles. We all have weaknesses and
Sure.
vices. That's the human condition. But, for me, the primary difference between them and us is that you and I, we might tell a lie once in a while. You have to. Look, you can't get through life without telling a few white lies. We might feel, be selfish and not do things that we probably should do. And, those are normal things. But with you and I, when we do those, we kind of feel bad about it. Like, yeah, you look great in that dress, honey. I know I'm lying, but, you don't look fat. Even though I'm doing it for a good reason.
To keep peace.
I'm doing it for a good reason, to keep peace. Because what are you going to say? Yeah, geez, you could lose 20. That's the end of your weekend. But to keep peace, yeah. But even still, there's a part of me inside that goes, "No, geez, like I don't like to have to lie to do that." With a psychopath, they have no conscience. So that's the chief fundamental difference between them and us. They don't have the conscience, so they can lie and cheat and murder and steal and molest children and rob the entire world blind. It doesn't matter to them. They don't feel bad about that. So even though we can define all the different characteristics, for an example, compulsive lying. Well, that's their way of getting through life, because they cannot tell the truth, because the truth is they are unfeeling predators and parasites. So how are you going to go around saying, "Hey, I'm a parasite"? No, of course not. So they have to lie, and they lie all the time, and their lies bamboozle us and manipulate us into giving them what they want. So compulsive lying, one of their chief characteristics. Lack of empathy. They can't feel what you and I feel. Grandiosity. These people are megalomaniacs. That's what we used to call them back in college days, egomaniacs. But that's what a psychopath is. They think the sun revolves around them. The world revolves around them. They're the best. They're the smartest. They're the most handsome. She's the most pretty. There's no end to it. You can't believe the arrogance of these people. So that's that. Impulsive behavior tends to be among the low-level psychopaths. I don't know why, because probably having something to do with the frontal cortex, which is where apparently conscience is processed. And so also the frontal cortex is where impulse control is handled. So no conscience, no impulse control, same area of the brain, probably related. So with the low levels, they can't restrain themselves. They want to bang this girl, and she doesn't want to put out, well, rape. They want this thing they can't afford, so steal it. So they'll do it impulsively. The higher level guys, they've been taught through probably their families and the education system to hold back a little bit, but even still, they can't resist. Look at Bill Clinton. He banged everything that moved in the White House. There, everybody knew it, from the Secret Service to Hillary and that, and he couldn't restrain himself, not even in office. So, yeah, they kept it out of the newspaper.
Well, there's always the issue that she's a lesbian, and they had always had the agreement that they got it outside, but he made it a little bit too public.
Yeah, apparently the only reason they argued was because he was too obvious about it, and she wanted to keep more of more discretion.
Right. Yeah. Exactly right.
Not that he was fooling around, because she probably couldn't give a rat's ass about him. It's a business deal between them, obviously.
All right. So, how can one survive a psychopath? In your book, you state that for these criminals, crime is a survival mechanism anthropologists call the cheating strategy.
Yeah, it's and you find that in nature too. But it's a strategy. Everything boils down to sort of what is their survival strategy. It's almost going back to the selfish gene. Your biology only is interested in you surviving long enough to reproduce, and how you get to that point and what happens afterwards, nature doesn't care. So whoever can get reproduce their genes and get enough resources to support your offspring, that's fine. And most of us, because I think Nietzsche referred to morality as nothing more than the herd instinct, and I think partially right with that. I mean, our morality sort of arose out of our need to work as a community because, a group of human beings can overcome all the adversities of nature and take down a woolly mammoth. Individuals, not so much. And in order to work as a community, we've had to establish certain parameters of behavior, and that in turn forms our kind of morality. But there's another way, and it's called the cheating strategy. And you can only get away with it in a large society because if you were living in a small village and you were cheating everybody, it wouldn't take too long before all the villagers said, look, Hans is cheating everybody. Let's kick the son of a bitch out and, exile him to the Alps. So, but in a large society, people can go around using the cheating strategy and get away with it. And therefore it becomes efficient, economical. And that's what psychopaths do. Is they use the cheating strategy of lying, cheating, stealing.
Interesting. And I should point out that we are reading from your book, The Art of Urban Survival, for those who want to know. And we'll list that up on the shows. And at the end, I'll ask you about your website and other books, etc. All right. So what types of psychopaths are there?
Well, a lot of people have different opinions on different types of psychopaths. I sort of designated two basic characteristics. One is the primary psychopath who appears to have been born that way and might be genetic or epigenetic. We're not sure. There's arguments back and forth. But they certainly exhibit those psychopathic qualities early in life. You can see them, they're 5 years old and they're already, chopping off the ears of the kitty cat with a pair of scissors, and that kind of behavior, if you've ever, met a child psychopath or know the parents of a child psychopath, well, it's a horror movie, people can't sleep. They're worried their 10-year-old's going to sneak into their bedroom and cut their throats. So it seems there is a kind of a primary psychopath. And then there's the secondary, and you guys were discussing that at the last show. I forget what you called them, a synthetic psychopath. What was it, the term you used?
Pseudo-psychopath.
A pseudo-psychopath, yeah. And many of the researchers notice the same type of psychopath. They often use the term subclinical or a secondary or created psychopath. Anyways, it's a type of person who probably wasn't born with a genetic disposition towards this condition, but they've picked it up through their environment, and they are forced either through group pressure or as a result of abuse and drug abuse and abuse and drug abuse to assume the characteristics of a psychopath. Now, they may feel bad afterwards, but when they're under the influence of the group or under the influence of those drugs, they are in fact a psychopath and are no more reasonable than any primary psychopath would be. A typical example, and I remember you guys were talking about this, I think Joe Atwell brought this up too, and it's something I discussed in another article I was writing, and that is when soldiers are brought into boot camp. The Army uses the lure of the warrior ethic to bring the guys in, and young men want to be warriors. They want to protect their country and get the girl. So they enter boot camp, and then what happens in boot camp is a dehumanizing process. You're turning these guys upside down and inside out and conditioning them and brainwashing them into becoming a psychopath because it's just taking orders and don't think for yourself and do what you're told. And so they're sent off to Afghanistan and Iraq, and, they take part in horrific war crimes, and they come back, and now they're released back into society, and the conditions that created the psychopathic personality in them, such as the Army system, are now removed, and now they have to come home, and their conscience starts to kick in, and now they feel bad about what they did, and they don't feel proud about having been a Marine.
Sure. In fact, returning vets from the Iraq War are the highest rate of suicide.
And you wonder why it's the highest rate of suicide. I have a pretty good idea. It's just a theory, but my theory is that they were turned into psychopaths through the whole machinery.
And they were secondary psychopaths, and then they wake up, right? And then they can't deal with their actions and realizing that it was all order taking. And not even for our country, for that matter, you know.
Exactly. And all for what? All for nothing. They sold their souls. They committed wartime atrocities, and now they have to live with that for the rest of their lives, and you can't even justify it. I mean, it's sad. It's a terrible situation for them. So that's the secondary psychopath.
All right, what about people like Joseph Smith, L. Ron Hubbard, and Jim Jones?
Well, a lot of these psychopaths, they're smart, and a lot of them engage in what's called cons. And you have the short con, and then you have the big store con. And the short cons are the little tricks, the 3-card Monte, and
Right.
little cheats on the street, the bait and switch. Hey, you want to buy a stereo system off the back of my van? It's worth $12,000. I'll give it to you for 200. All those little scams, and they're good at scamming because they're compulsive liars and they get away with it. But if they're a little bit smarter, they go for what's called the big store scam. And if you've seen the movie The Sting, you'll get what that is. But the primary, the most famous guy that did the big store scam was Ponzi, who created the original Ponzi scheme. And
Right.
he would run the Ponzi scheme out of a bank. He would wait for the bank manager to go out on his lunch hour, and then he would sneak into the bank manager's office and see clients. So they came to the bank and they thought he was the manager there. I mean, the ball's on the guy. So the big store con then is religion. All these religions. I love the quote by Mark Twain where he says, "Religion was born the day the first fool met the first con artist," and
Or the first psychopath, right?
or the first psychopath. Religion is a con. And so what? Psychopaths behind religions? That's no surprise. They're all cons. Scientology, Mormonism, all the New Age cults, Jim Jones. Sure, it's easy. If you're a compulsive liar and you've got a lot of fools around you, it's easy street. It's easy money. Sure.
All right, what is the modus operandi of the psychopath?
Well, the first thing they do is cold read you. They got to see if you're a good victim. It's like, you're at the buffet and you want to do a little taste to see which is the best tasting food for you. They do the same thing. They go around and they kind of cold read people. Do you have money? Do you have sex? Are you pretty? Can I manipulate you? Can I use you? So they do a quick cold reading on you, and they are able to, they're pretty good at, amateur psychologists. They'll get a read for you. And then after that, they're going to plan their engagement with you. And what they first do is what's called like the honeymoon period. They wine you and dine you, and they're really interested in everything you say. And you're the smartest guy I've ever seen, and you're so wonderful and handsome, and I love your house, and I love your fancy car. Anyways, whatever it takes, whatever you are vain about, they'll approach that, and they're really good at reading you, so you will feel flattered, and they're good at flattery. So once they've ingratiated themselves into your good graces, once they've got you to drop your barrier, because everybody has a barrier up when you meet new people, right? You don't know who that person is. It's instinctive with all animals. You meet a strange animal, they hunch up. They're not too sure who's that until they all sniffed each other's butts. Same thing with humans. We meet strangers and we have our hackles up. So they try to get you to lower your guard, and they do that by being very charming, very charming. Now you've lowered your guard and you're starting to trust them. Once you start to trust them, they'll start to manipulate you slowly and slowly. It's called behavior modification. B.F. Skinner, here's your desired behavior. Here's the behavior that they have now. And you slowly mold it this way, this way, this way. It starts off with, the ultimate behavior for, say, some psychopathic, stalker is to have complete control over the woman. She can't see anybody, talk to anybody. So it doesn't start off that way. He doesn't, on the first date say, by the way, I want you chained to the stove barefoot and pregnant for the rest of your life. No, it starts off do you have to go to see your parents this weekend? They're not really too nice to you. Maybe you should, wait till next weekend to see them. Or I don't like that friend of yours. I think she's just using you. Anyways, slowly but surely they manipulate you until they've isolated you from any kind of help, any kind of a support group. And it's the same thing as the predator does in the jungle. When the lions look at the herd, right? The first thing they do is they look around for the weakest weakest member, the weakest wildebeest. That's the interview stage. That's where they're, doing the cold reading. Once they've singled out the weakest or the sickest member of the herd, then they try to cut that one out from the rest of the herd. So they start chasing it around, and the other animals will run in one direction, and then another lion will come up and try to cut them from the herd, and that is separating them from the herd. Same thing with people. They try and separate you from your family, separate you from your friends. And then once they've got you separated, then the manipulation and the ultimate control comes in, where they just sink their fangs in you and try to drain you dry.
And I suppose the politician using that technique would be called tiptoe totalitarianism.
Of course, it's exactly. What do the politicians do? Well, first they do market studies on their demographics, which is the interview stage. So you're campaigning in this state. They're all farmers. They all have Protestant backgrounds. So they already know. They're profiling you. So now they're going to be charming. They get up on stage. They promise you this for the farmers and that for the Protestant church, and they tell you exactly what you want to hear, and they're charming and they're good looking because they got the hair and makeup, and so then the voters start to drop their guard, and they like him. He's saying what they want to hear. Well, of course, because he's already profiled you. He's already done the interview, and now he's just telling you what you want to hear during the honeymoon stage. So if he's convincing enough, he's voted into office. The minute he steps through the door of Congress, he immediately betrays his constituents. So the same process.
All right, well, I guess we covered how psychopaths use seduction and divide and conquer. What about fear?
Well, they'll use a carrot stick approach, right? And that's always the most effective with animals. Do what I say, and maybe I'll take you out on Saturday, or I'll buy you a dinner or something like that. Don't do what I say, and I will beat the living snot out of you. And look at what's happening with our government now. Give up more of your rights, and the state will protect you. But if you speak up against the state, well, we're going to have to put you in a protest area, and we're going to have to monitor everything you say and do, and we might have be paid a visit by the guys in blue that will kick down your door and shoot your dog. So there's the carrot and the stick. Do as we say, and we'll be okay with you. Don't do as we say, and we will kill your dog. That's the government in action these days. And it's fear. Everybody's afraid. I was talking to another radio host the other day, and I said, so how are things over there? And he goes, I got to get out of here. I got to get to Panama as soon as I can. I'm selling my house. I'm selling everything. And I'm talking to a lot of people. People are scared, and they're scared of their governments. They're not scared of the terrorists. They're scared of their governments.
Well, what is a terrorist? If you look it up, it's government by coercion. So, government by fear. And that's when you hear Bush and Obama and whoever else on the television parading all of this stuff around, that's what they don't tell, is that that they are the ones who create the terrorists. In fact, I even came across an article recently that I think it was out of England, maybe The Guardian or something, discussing how most terrorist attacks are actually false flag type operations.
Mm-hmm.
And same thing with Sandy Hook and these others. You start looking at the photography and the video clips, and none of it matches up, and you realize, oh yeah, it's another one. All right, is it possible for someone to defend themselves against psychopaths?
It is, but usually the advice I give to people is just escape and evade. Just cut yourself off from them, avoid them. If you're in a relationship with them, break off, change your address, change your phone number, change your email address. You just have to separate yourself from them as much as possible. If you work for a psychopath, then send out your resume, try to find another job, get out of there. That's your best bet, because most people just don't have what it takes. You can't go up against these people. We feel, we have sympathy, and those are a weakness when it's a battle for survival. And so the average person just doesn't have the gonads it takes to go up against these people. They're just so ruthless. And, even when you think you know them to some degree, yeah, they're manipulating you and now you're onto them. And when you call them on their bluff or when you try to expose them, they can turn another shade of ugly you've never seen before. And it can be very frightening, and a lot of people be scared and intimidated by it. So just detach yourself from their influence as quietly and as quickly as possible. Mind you, if you're somebody who's tough, you've got a really strong character, and you're not afraid of anything, and you don't care, what this person comes at you with, you're going to deal with it. Then yeah, confront them. But there's not too many people that can do that.
I hear that. All right. How can one recognize a psychopath?
I always encourage people to avoid coming to hasty conclusions and quick diagnoses. Personally, I don't like it when people try to diagnose everybody around them based on some signs. The best way to spot a psychopath is over time. First of all, you have to be observant, and in addition to listening to your radio show, the previous one that you did, I encourage all your listeners to read a book by Robert Hare or Hervey Checkley, People of the Lie, or do your own research on it, because it's not going to be enough information from what we're going to discuss today, and get up on that subject. Then once you, the best way to spot them is over time, because they use up a lot of energy to put on this performance for you, right? They're pretending to be human. Really, they want to say, "Rah, rah, 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 I'm going to kill you. I hate you." So that's what's going on.
They're what we call, I think it was Joe that came up with this term, Joe Atwill, lifetime actors.
Yeah, exactly. That's Joe. I was listening to that, and that was a apt description. They're actors, but it takes a lot of energy. Like you and I, if you're going to do a radio show, or if you're going to go, present a toast at the wedding, you can get up for it and you put on your best voice and try to be funny. That's okay. But you can see how tiring that gets. Can you imagine doing that 24/7? So what happens is they Hervey Checkley wrote the book The Mask of Sanity, and that's what it is. They have this mask on them, and it takes a lot of effort to keep that mask up, and every now and then it drops, and they'll do something or say something that is so immoral or so out of sync with what a normal feeling person would do, that most people will go, "What the hell was that? What did he just say?" And it's when you get those types of clues over time, when you find, he loves animals, but suddenly the kitten runs in front of him and he gives it a kick and knocks it against the wall. Oops, sorry. Really? Sorry? You just kicked that kitten and you claim you love animals? It's those kind of contradictions. And they'll right away bring up the mask. "Oh, no, I was an accident. I love animals." And then the next day you see him pulling the dog by the dog leash and think, it's over time, you see contradictions between their character and their moral behavior.
What are some things not to do with regard to psychopaths?
Yeah, they're very good at getting you to give them another chance. You see, people think that, the popular culture, and I blame the New Age movement, as I know you do too, and Joe Atwell, I blame Christianity for having this turn the other cheek forgiveness meme, just completely brainwashing people. Yeah, it's the best kind of victim you want, the kind that blames himself and tries harder to please you after you've abused them. So people make the mistake of thinking that if I try harder, they'll be a good person. Or if I love them more, or if I talk to them about Jesus and ask them to bring Jesus into his, all these approaches, forget about it. They don't work. They're incurable, as all the research has proven time and time again. So any attempt on the part of a person that's engaged with a psychopath to remedy the situation is doomed to failure. So forget about trying to help them. Forget about, getting them to overcome their psychopathy. It never happens. So don't waste your time. Get away from them, forget about them, and don't feel sorry for them.
When I worked for this psychopath out in LA, I was a hiring manager for this company. And some of the people that I interviewed told me that this guy was a psychopath, and I just no, no, no. And after I left the company, I could immediately begin to see a lot of the stuff that he was pulling, and I in fact alerted some of the other employees there. But often it's in hindsight in a situation like that when we realize that we were in the grips of a psychopath.
Yeah. Yeah, it's often in hindsight. That's why I say it's only over time that they reveal themselves. In the beginning, they're, like I said, often very charming and convincing. And you don't want to think badly about people. I don't want to think everybody's a psychopath, and I don't. But yeah, over time, the best defense is to always be cautious with yourself and how much you give. I like to contribute to charity. I'm involved in, the activist movements and here in Toronto, and I go out to the meetings and things. But I'm careful about how much I give and how, where I'm going to spend my money or who I'm going to invite over to the house and things like that. I'm very guarded that way. Like, I'm willing to be open and giving, but I'm never going to leave myself vulnerable. And,
right.
That's the best way. And then, if you're not vulnerable to attack, not vulnerable to it, then you can afford the time to watch and look and see who's what and what are they doing and what's the situation here. So you have, and again, that gets back into sort of like martial arts. There's a concept called the impenetrable defense, where you are just so good, so aware of your surroundings. People are literally stopped in their tracks from attacking you. Miyamoto Musashi wrote about it. And I thought it was all myth because I always tend to be very skeptical about things. But years and years of practice, I realized actually he's right. If you're very aware and if you're sure of yourself and you're smart and you're self-reliant and you don't leave yourself wide open to being vulnerable, then they can't hurt you.
Yeah, it's interesting, and the more I keep when you say that, I keep remembering instances in my life, and like I said, when I was working, and there was another time I was actually working up in the Bay Area, and I was in San Francisco, about a block away from the freeway on-ramp, which is a pretty bad neighborhood down there. I can't remember the name of the street, but I remember I had to deliver some products to a few of the stores in the neighborhood for my friend's company that I was working for. And when I walked out of one of these stores, there was 3 or 4 big guys there eyeballing me, getting ready to, I could tell they were getting ready to jump me. And, what I did was I tightened up. And instead of, they were expecting me to cower. And
Right.
instead, I walked right at them and just said, "Excuse me," and pushed them out of my way as I walked in between them.
Yeah.
And they just kind of stepped back and went, what the heck just happened? And, and it's like just little things like that. It's just...
And like, you weren't a scrappy guy then. You weren't getting into street fights all the time, right?
Never, And, I mean, if they wanted to, they would have taken me. But the issue was, again, it's just your attitude. It's how you carry yourself. And they're looking for that easy prey. So even if you are easy prey and you're not a good fighter, if you can make yourself, as long as you act confident and this is going to be hell for them, if they come after you, and I didn't stop and talk to them like I would to the guys, for the newspaper. But, I remember, just looking back, and seeing as I cut through them, this kind of astonished look on their face, it takes them by surprise. So anything that you can use as, to your advantage, and I think it's, the self-confidence thing has to play a huge part in that.
Yeah. Musashi also wrote that, in a fight between two opponents where all else is equal, their skill level, their age, their weaponry, then it is the fighter that has the greatest spirit that will win. And that's what you're referring to there. And that's what I was referring to with the impenetrable defense and about being confident and being aware. Because, first of all, if you walked out of the store with your nose in your iPad and didn't even notice these guys, they would have jumped you because you're not present. You would have been too easy a mark. So you walked out and you noticed them. That's the awareness I'm talking about. It's, in the military, they call it situational awareness, meaning look around you. Who's beside you? Who's behind you? Scan reflective surfaces to see if there's somebody coming up behind you. You got to keep your head up and your eyes open. And if you do that and you walk like that, they won't touch you.
Interesting. And another thing that I've, ever since my early 20s, I think I've done is whenever I enter a restaurant or anything like that, I always pick a table where I can, and a chair where I can see the entire restaurant.
Yeah.
It's
Always sit with your back against the wall facing the entrance. It's basic spycraft, right?
All right. So how can we use the threat of exposure to drive psychopaths away?
Again, you've got to be pretty savvy. You got to have the gonads to do this. To go up to a psychopath and say, look, I know you're a psychopath. And if you don't stop whatever it is you want them to stop, pilfering the kitty, abusing their kids, sleeping around with your wife. If you don't stop this, I will expose you because I know what you are and I've got the goods on you. And I will tell everybody. Yeah, that's a way of driving them away because for them, there's a lot of fish in the ocean. So if it becomes, again, we're going to go back to predator-prey ratio and the physics of predators. For example, a predator will not expend more energy tracking down a prey or tracking down its prey than that prey would provide in return in calories. This is the basic plot of that science fiction movie with Robert Duvall, THX 1130, I think it was.
Right.
That's the basic premise. So with any kind of a predator, if they think it's harder for them to get what they want from you, they will tend to disengage from you and find a juicier target. That's why a lion doesn't hunt down mice, because the energy, the amount of calories a lion would expend to hunt down a mouse that provides in turn, 100 calories back, the lion would starve to death if it did nothing but hunt mice. So it doesn't do that. The same thing when a cheetah is chasing after Steinbock, and you see those wildlife videos, and most of the time the cheetah will get him. But if the race lasts longer than 5 minutes, the cheetah is using up too much energy, and now he breaks off the attack because it's no longer worth it. And so in human interactions between us, the victims, and the predators, the harder we can make it for them to succeed in screwing us over or taking from us, the more likely it is that they will disengage.
Now, is it right for us to call them predators when it makes them sound like that they are a natural part of the animal kingdom or human evolution, whatever you want to call it? I mean, aren't we giving them a place if we use that term, or is there, something else that we should address them? Just psychopath? What do you think?
I prefer psychopath. But, to explain their presence in human society according to, the laws of nature, then they would fulfill the role of psychopath. But not just that, though. There's another facet to this. The basic street criminals, you could say that they're the predators. But the higher functioning psychopaths, they follow a different strategy, and that is the strategy of the parasite.
Right. And another interesting thing with considering them predators, and that's kind of the justification a lot of psychopaths use is they'll compare themselves to nature, to lions, to something like that. But
right, yeah,
a lot of these psychopaths actually commit a lot of eugenics, a lot of mass murder, things like that. And, when you see lions, they're not mass murdering water buffalo or gazelle or whatever. They're going after one. Yeah. They take what they need and they leave the rest of the herd. And I have seen a video of this one mother lion taking care of a gazelle or something for a couple of weeks while she prepared to, it was a baby, and she mothered it until she was ready to kill it and eat it,
Yeah. That's why I'm I'm going to the parasite. The To explain the kind of insanity and gross evil. I mean, I'd like to think it was demonic. I'm even keeping my mind open to it. It might be some interdimensional demonic sort of entity, but the parasite strategy makes sense because parasites are really bizarre and evil creatures. And one of the attributes of a parasite that they found recently is that many of them actually take over the brains of their victims. And what we see today, let me
mind
set up.
control. It's rampant in mind control.
Of
It's
course,
absolutely rampant.
that's
Go
what
ahead.
they do. Yeah. I'm going to give a theory here, and I'm working on an article to explain it, but here's my theory. Human society is a living organism. That's not original. A lot of writers and philosophers have noticed that. So if we're a human organism, if society is an organism, then it is subject to the same laws as any other organism. That means it can be killed by a number of ways. It can die of old age. It can die by accident. It can die from predation. It can die from disease. And it can also die by parasite. It's the fifth way of that organisms die on this planet. So what is happening, I believe, with our society is that we are dying from a parasitic infection. And as just like each of us, individuals compose a cell in this mega organism known as society, therefore then the psychopaths would play the role of a cancer cell in this mega society. And that would explain why it's killing the host.
Well, I think you and I are on the same page there without even saying it.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, should we cut psychopaths completely out of our lives? For those out there in the audience who may work for one or in a relationship with one, etc., what do we do?
Well, not all of them are evil. Again, it's a dysfunction in the brain. It's sort of like color blindness, except that it affects their ability to empathize and to feel things. There was a physicist. What was his name? Oh, geez, I should have brought that up. And he was researching the warrior gene, I believe it was. And it turned out they found that there is a genetic marker for psychopathy. Not only is there a genetic marker, there is also a brain scan that they can do with an MRI that would show that that part of the brain is inactive, and that would indicate the person was a psychopath. And this doctor did a test on himself and found that he had not only the genetic marker, but the brain scan showed that he was also a psychopath. And yet he was a successful doctor and a family man. And he went to his family and asked him, he says, I have all the signs and symptoms of being a psychopath. Do you people think I'm a psychopath? And they said, well, Dad, yeah, you just don't get a lot of things. You don't feel things that other people feel. And, there's a lot of connections that we can't make with you. But otherwise, you're pretty good and we still love you. So he wasn't malevolent. He wasn't manipulating people for his own benefit. He wasn't scheming and being sadistic like many of the psychopaths are. And he attributed that because of his childhood. He said that his childhood he was brought up by the most loving, understanding, wonderful parents in the world. He had a wonderful childhood. And because of that, he wasn't malevolent. So he's a psychopath, and yet, there wasn't anything, he wasn't causing anybody any harm. So should we, disengage from all psychopaths? No. What we need to disengage from is these psychotic psychopaths, these sadistic, malevolent psychopaths.
And interestingly, Timothy Leary is who wrote the entrance exams for the CIA. And he says, and I'll pull it up here, he says in this quote here, I really am a psychopath. I know you are, replied Charles Schlack, but I'm one too. You aren't in my league at all, Leary said. And and Leary was the #1 personality tester in the United States and wrote the entrance exams for the CIA, which of course raises the strong probability that what the CIA hires is psychopaths.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, because if you want somebody to do all the dirty work and not have to worry about them having emotional issues later, like coming home and committing suicide like our troops, yeah, hire the psychopaths. They, my one saving hope for all this is because they certainly seem to have the upper hand in society and they've got control of everything. And, they're going forward with their agenda of enslaving the world because that's what these malevolent types of psychopaths want. They want to enslave us. That's what gets them off is total domination. I always used a analogy with Jeffrey Dahmer. He was a classic psychopath. And what was he doing? He was drilling holes in the skulls of his victims and pouring in sulfuric acid, hoping to create a mindless zombie that he could abuse with impunity. That sort of reveals the kind of mentality of the rest of these psychopaths. They want us to be mindless automatons that they can order about and enslave, and we're just grateful to lick their boots, and they can lord us over us like gods. That's why all these emperors and everybody in the past, the Roman Caesars, they all became gods. I mean, that's the megalomania again, okay? Because once they have all the money in the world, they're still not satisfied. No, now I must be an immortal god and rule over a race of slaves that will worship. Oh, that's what these people are. Yeah.
All right. What sort of lies and deceptions do psychopaths and pseudo-psychopaths use?
Whatever works for them, whatever the situation is. They make it up on the spot. They're good at it. They're very good at it. Some not so good. A lot of these politicians, they're not as good as they think. Bush was a terrible liar. Oh my God, I could spot him every time. Same with Obama. But they'll use whatever they can. If they think you're religious, then they're religious. Then, you have to forgive me. What would Jesus do? And if they think you're Muslim, then, well, what does the Quran say about psychopaths? Shouldn't you give me another chance? They'll use whatever it takes to get what they want. So they're full spectrum liars and brilliant at it. They're good. Yeah.
All right. Do lie detectors normally work on psychopaths?
Normally, no. And even non-psychopaths can be trained to fool a lie detector. Years ago, I was doing biofeedback, and I was experimenting on myself. I hooked myself up into all kinds of machines, EEGs and GSRs, and tried to get back this was in the days before computers. It was expensive equipment. I would go and buy it. And there was a 2-week return policy. So for 2 weeks, I'd experiment like crazy on myself. And then I'd return and get my money back because I couldn't afford that stuff. It was expensive equipment. Anyways, it taught me how to pass a lie detector test because it's a matter of controlling your physiological reactions. So a lie detector only works because of the premise that a guilty person will exhibit that contradiction by physiological reactions. In other words, if you're lying, a good, honest, decent person will start to sweat, will get nervous, may tremble, may make mistakes in their speech. And a lie detector picks up physiological reactions. But if you're not guilty about lying, which a psychopath isn't, then there are no physiological reactions to pick up. And if you've been trained in biofeedback, you can pass that lie detector test as well because I know how to control my breathing and to lower my blood pressure when I'm telling a lie. I can do that. And it's a simple trick, really.
Does that make you a psychopath, Stefan?
When I first started researching it, and like a lot of people do, when you research it, you think to yourself, oh my God, I must be a psychopath. I have so many of those qualities. It's kind of like the horoscope effect, right? When you read a horoscope entry and you think, oh yeah, that applies to me. So we tend to identify with these characteristics a lot, but I'm not a psychopath because I feel too much and I really don't have the stomach for cruelty. I can't watch cruel things. I will start to cry. Even a big grown man like me, a tough martial artist, 6'2", 220 pounds, I will bawl my eyes out if I see a video about puppy abuse, So and the same thing with human abuse, with the imageries that have been coming out of Gaza these days. I can't look at it. It's just overwhelming.
Israel is, oh my God, talk about a psychopathic society. My goodness.
Well, of course, but it's based on a psychopathic religion. The biggest psychopath in history is Jehovah. Oh my God! I mean, if you were to take the characteristics,
the war psychopath, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and submit the characteristics of this character to any kind of forensic psychiatry board, they would all come back with a diagnosis of extreme sociopathy, So what? It's a surprise that people that base a religion on psychopathy tend to be psychopaths? No, not a surprise at all,
I couldn't
Same
agree
thing
with
with
you more. Yeah.
Christian,
Well,
Muslim.
I think Christianity and Islam were actually, the evidence shows, like from Joe Atwill's work, et cetera, that it was set up as a defense against Israel or against Judaism in the first place. Both of them were. But of course, the psychopaths in charge, rather than truly
Exactly.
elevating the people, they created a protective mechanism for the people, but didn't really fully elevate them to a level of understanding. All right, what are nonverbal clues to deception that psychopaths use?
Well, that's under the chapter on how to detect lies. And as we've seen that a lie detector is, fallible. A lot of people will give false positives.
I
If
mean, I mean nonverbal clues, though.
But with nonverbal clues, it's basically body language and tics and the way they look. But I'll be honest with you, it helps as an indicator, as a percentage, but it's not foolproof. And I would use that only in conjunction with the logical fallacies that I would detect. Of course, remember liars know to look you in the eye when they lie. So if somebody's looking you too much in your eyes when they're telling you a story. Exactly. Then I go, okay, he's trying to convince me he's telling the truth. Why would he try and convince me he's telling the truth by doing such an obvious body language trick? Everybody knows that trick. I really love you. Just let's spend the night together and tomorrow I'll call you. Like, sure, I'm going to look you deep in the eyes when I say that, right? Um, but yeah, there's contractions. When you're telling the truth, you tend to speak in contractions. So when you lie, you tend to spell it out. So I didn't do it tends to be more truthful than I did not do it. The body language too is the touching the face, touching the mouth as though they're trying to cover up a lie. The furtive looking with the eyes. If you're making up a story, the eyes tend to look up. Now you're creating something. So if you lie, you tend to kind of look up a little bit when you lie and a little bit towards the right. But if you're telling the truth, you tend to look down a little bit. But it also depends on the subject matter. If you're recalling visual information, you're looking up. If you're recalling physical information, you're looking down. So if I said, oh, that really hurt, now I'm lying or there's an indication I might be lying because I'm describing a physical sensation that I'm supposed to be feeling, and yet I'm looking up, which tends to indicate that I'm imagining this, right?
So it's understanding some levels of NLP as well, so that you can read their body language,
Oh,
neuro-linguistic programming.
yeah, another psychopathic paradigm there. A whole science for psychopaths,
Well,
NLP.
and John Grinder, Richard Bandler, the whole group of those guys were heavily involved in MK Ultra. They tie right in. In fact, caveat, legal caveat here. I think it was Richard Bandler who was put on trial for murder of a young girl, and it was found innocent. But here we have, ironically, the one of the key founders of NLP who uses Milton Erickson's hypnosis
Oh,
and was
yeah.
friends with all, Gregory Bates and all these MK Ultra guys using these techniques. So then, the question has to be asked, did he use these techniques in court to get off the murder charges? I don't have any evidence of that. Again, legal caveat, my opinion stated here, et cetera, because the guy is still alive, but raises some serious issues about him.
Sure. Yeah, and also, like these psychopaths recognize each other. Like you said, does that make me a psychopath? No, but I do have a lot of psychopathic qualities that could be mistaken for a psychopath. For example, I'm easily bored like a psychopath is. But, what it really is that I don't suffer fools lightly. Just
Well, yeah, exactly right.
So, if you just, I'm 57. I've had a lifetime of idiots. I don't have time for any more idiots. I'm interested in intelligent people that live according to their own internal moral law. Those are the people I admire. And just another, moron that's regurgitating the programming that he learned from TV. Give me a break. I've already heard it. So.
And then they come at you. Oh, I have great, wonderful feedback, and you're not taking my great, wonderful feedback that you've already heard 1,000 times, and they don't ever state anything new or rarely,
And it's not like feedback that you didn't already self-critique yourself with anyways. So, like it's nothing you can tell me that I haven't figured
it's like,
out.
as an author, one of my favorite things is when you write a book, and, I like this analogy. You write a book on fishing, and all of a sudden all of these people come up to you and tell you that your book on Chevy engines is all wrong, and you've never written a book on Chevy engines. They've never read your book on fishing, right? And if you try to tell them that you've never written a book on Chevy engines, they'll tell you that you're wrong and to shut up, and you're not taking their valuable feedback.
Right. So I know it's a little bit harsh of me, but time is limited, man. I got, another 40, 50 good years left, and then that's it. So I don't have time to waste on these people anymore,
If you go to 107, you'll be right in there,
Yeah, but what was I going to say? What was the question?
Well, I don't know. We'll go to the next one here. What about logic, contradictions, fallacies, redirection, confrontation, investigation, all of that good stuff?
Sure. Everything has its own internal logic. There's, what they call higher criticism. For example, in the book that Anne Frank wrote, somebody was analyzing in terms of internal logic, and here there was contradictions in the book. For example, they always had to be very quiet because the Nazis might hear them, and yet she complained that on Sundays it was so noisy from all the vacuum cleaning that they were doing with the electric vacuum cleaner. Well, what is it? You either have to be quiet all the time because of the Nazis, or she's vacuuming. You can't have the two things together at the same time, and it contradicts each other. And it's the same thing with the people's stories. Like, look at the 9/11 story. I mean, the internal contradictions are so overwhelming. It's a lie. There's a contradiction in the logic of everything that went on that day. It's a blatant lie.
Yeah, and I just did a show last week with Lennon Honor on this very topic and using fear-based mind control, and he discusses how they intentionally create these contradictions in the information. Then as I was putting the interview together to release it, and we've been doing a lot of research. Again, Gregory Bateson's name comes up. He's always, popping up in this stuff as one of the MK Ultra researchers, but I'm looking for the psychological name to put in, the definition on screen in the video last week with Lennon Honor, and the first thing it pulls up, or the second thing it pulled up, it was Gregory Bateson's double bind, and I was like, oh geez, and you look at the double bind, and there it is, and we've been exposing the double bind, especially in the roundtable discussions, pretty heavily recently, and then Alan Watts, the famous hippie Zen philosopher. He took Gregory Bateson's double bind and then mixed it into Zen Buddhism, and so that was intentional mind control there. We have, again, John Grinder and Richard Bandler using Gregory Bateson's double bind, and they talk about it in their books, and then even Gregory Bateson wrote the introduction for their Magic Book 1, whatever it's called. So here we see them using these exact same techniques by, because most people don't realize that a contradiction is a lie or an error.
Yes.
And so when you have that recognition, it doesn't cause the cognitive dissonance that makes most people give up, where they say, oh, well, opinions are just like assholes and you can't know the truth. Well, that's because you're not looking at the contradictions and saying, okay, well, let's strip away all the bull. Let's get down to the primary and let's see what it really is. So they just give up, and then they live in this, state of cognitive confusion.
Yeah. I edited a book written by a psychologist on the double bind. I forget what it was called now. The title. I don't want to give it out anyways because she's still around. I don't want to insult her, but I don't know what to say about this stuff. It's the imagination of the psychopath with all their manipulation, and they can spin things so many different ways. And what I think is happening, for example, you mentioned earlier the Sandy Hook and going all the way back to JFK. Here's what it is: the average, ordinary, run of the mill, knuckle dragging, I don't know what, middle intelligence person. Yeah, the double bind works on them, and they're all confused, and well, they can't think anyways, and so it works great on them. But also, it works on people like you and me because it gaslights us. You see, I see the Zapruder film, and I say to myself, this was released in, I think, 1969. Why didn't
Yeah, by Henry Luce and Time Life, and of course they were involved in the whole thing. Go ahead.
yeah, when you saw that, it immediately dispelled any notion that Lee Harvey Oswald was the assassin. How could you not see it? I always refer to Bill Hicks, t- to the back and to the left, to the back and to the left. Yeah. Hello. Does nobody understand basic physics anymore? How can an entire nation look at that video and not immediately know that that shot that killed him came from the right and from the front, which was the grassy knoll? So I noticed that. I know that the laws of physics cannot be broken. People can't grow wings and fly, and John F. Kennedy was not shot from behind.
Well, we have quantum physics today that tells you that reality isn't real and that, whatever you believe you can make up and all of this nonsense. And you know what? They have mathematical formulas. Never mind that they don't have any onus of proof, but they've created formulas that they use to prove that nonsense.
Sure.
Oh, boy.
Fritjof Capra's The Tao of Physics a long time ago, and The Dancing Woolly Masters. These were early books on the whole, oh my God.
Quantum physics is a longer running fraud than the Piltdown hoax was.
I never, I understood it. And to be honest with you, the split screen experiments that Einstein did, well, very interesting. And also the light experiments, I recreated it for myself with the polarized lenses, with at a 90-degree angle to cut the light off, but you add a third one in front behind it at 45 and the light comes through. Yeah, that's really kind of interesting. I'll explain some other time, but there are some interesting things there, but then how they were able to take some interesting phenomena and then extrapolate into this whole universal paradigm. Where did you get that from?
And where they got it from is the Kabbalah. The quantum physics is just the Kabbalah repackaged.
Oh, really?
And there's a 2,800 page book exposing Einstein's fraud called The Manufacture and Sale of Saint Einstein by John Bjerknes. It lays out his, he was an extreme racist Talmudic Zionist. Mm-hmm. And, he
shoelaces.
Right, the idea of these guys creating quantum physics was to keep people fooled and in the loop and not trusting your own five senses to look things up. Yeah. And, we can't know truth. We can't know reality because, after all, look at quantum physics, Yeah. But, you have to learn to question the premises of these things to begin with before you say, it's like, oh, anything can be real. Really, when I go to the grocery store, do I give the guy 100 and he gives me, for a candy bar and he gives me back $1 and I say, okay. If I walk outside and my car is missing, do I say, oh, look at that, it elevated to another level?
Yeah, I know. This got crazy. Look, there is something there. There is. There are laws and there are energies and there are, activities. It's a huge universe. We're insignificant little specks. We can't possibly comprehend everything that's going on. So there's a large area of doubt. Doesn't mean that you can fill in that doubt with a load of bullshit.
Right. Well, there's something called the onus of proof, and there's something called arguing the arbitrary. And if you don't have the onus of proof, you're arguing the arbitrary. And under logic,
Yeah.
you throw it out by default. It's not to say that, you know what, you don't have any proof today, bring it next week so I can look at it.
Yeah.
Okay, but if you don't have any evidence and there isn't any evidence, then don't sell me your religion, because then that's what it is. And you know, the thing is we can speculate all day long about things that we have zero evidence for. Okay.
Sure.
I mean, you can literally pull things out your rear end to your heart's desire forever with no evidence. But once you actually have to start looking for evidence for each of your claims and your suppositions, etc., then it changes the way that your mind thinks and how you look at data. And you can realize that people don't have the onus of proof, are either duped or they're pulling your leg. And so when we understand this basic premise, it's a really good guide. You know, number one, is there evidence? Number two, you know, can I see it? Number three, is it full of fallacies and contradictions? Do the fallacies and contradictions disprove the evidence? Or, you know, I mean, you know, if somebody calls someone a jerk at the start of the paper, it doesn't necessarily mean that the whole paper is based on fallacies. But you still need to look at that. Okay, well, he's starting off using an ad hominem attack. What does this weigh into the argument? And then you study the argument for it itself. Going back to my analogy of, you know, writing a book on fishing versus Chevy engines, and having people come and tell you that your book on Chevy engines that you never wrote is all wrong. At least, you know, have the intelligence to read the person's argument first before you claim to know all about it and this and that. And then once you're on the same page, which is where the term comes from, then you can go point by point, and then you can address any errors that are actually found. It's that easy.
Yeah, yeah. I always get into argument with the New Agers because they always bring up energy. It's energy.
Yeah.
And I go, what kind of energy? Well, you know, energy. I said, you know, thermal, electric, magnetic. You know, what kind of energy? Well, it's energy. Oh, you know, they pick up on these little cute words, and they just regurgitate it. They don't know the meaning of it, of course.
Right.
You know?
All right, let's talk about anger and aggression.
Well, I included that chapter in the book because for two reasons. One, so that the reader can tell when other people are getting angry and how to dissipate that anger. And also the causes of anger, why people do get angry. Now, this is different from the psychopath. This is just your average person. We all get angry. I get angry all the time too. And why do you get angry, and what are the causes? And if you want to avoid, you know, unnecessary violence from, you know, non-psychopathic people, then the best thing to do is be able to figure out what makes them angry and try to avoid doing that. It's real simple. You know, I always tell people, you know, don't sleep with the guy's wife, and don't steal from them, and they won't be angry. There's a lot of things that, so it's basically most of that material, I'll be honest with you, I kind of took from Desmond Morris's The Naked Ape and some other books on aggression, anger and aggression. There was another book on that. But it's to help you to tell when other people are about to lose it. You don't want to be, you know, I've seen this, you might have seen this too. You know, you're at a party or you're at a bar or you're outside somewhere, and there's some guy and he's kind of brooding, and he's steaming, and he's brooding, and he's brooding, and then suddenly he breaks out into violence, and he just, you know, runs out and starts slugging some guy. You know, as a warrior, as a person who should be aware of his surroundings and get what life's about and avoid being a victim, you got to be aware of things like that. I can read a person, and I'm just like a psychopath. I'm pretty good at cold reading now too. I can tell if people come on and they're aggressive. I already know that when, you know, if I walk into a bar and there's a group of guys sitting there drinking, I can tell if they're looking for a fight, you know, right away. So I will go to another bar, or I will make sure I'm as far away from those guys as possible. Or if not, then I will try to dissipate that kind of aggression by, you know, something like what you did. And I've done this before. I'd walk up to them, hey guys, can I buy you a beer or something like that? You know, whatever it takes to dissipate that aggression, and also to control it in yourself. Miyamoto Musashi also wrote that the angry man defeats himself in battle. Again, this is about survival. The book is about, you know, you being a warrior and you being able to survive situations. You cannot afford to allow yourself to lose it, because when you lose it, you don't think clearly, and you'll make stupid mistakes, and those stupid mistakes can get you killed and get you hurt. So in addition to knowing how other people get angry, know how to control your own anger and calm down. The best revenge is best served cold. Don't fly off the handle. Instead, take it in, pull back, relax, go for a walk, and think about what to do then. But don't just react because you're pissed off.
What are signs of aggression?
Signs of aggression is the same like with animals. First of all, they'll start to get twitchy. There is what we call um, oh no, I got to go back to my behavioral psychology days. Dissipative behavior, where, for example, the guy wants to hit you, but he can't do it quite yet because he's not pissed off enough. So he'll make hitting actions or gestures by hitting the table or just swatting the air or shaking his fist. Shaking a fist is an example. They don't quite at the point where they want to punch you, but they have so much energy built up, and that energy has to be dissipated. So dissipated behavior is when they start, getting twitchy. Also, they'll tend to puff themselves up, and then the guys will walk with their arms out to the side. Anybody that's really into martial arts and is an idiot will walk around like this, right, with his arms spread out. They're looking for a fight. That whole arms akimbo pose that guys assume when they're trying to be tough. Things like that. It's in the body language like that. So remember, angry people will try to blow themselves up to try to make themselves look bigger. If you're observant enough, you might be able to see the hair rising up at the back of the neck. Our manes will furl, the lip starts to snarl. You'll see more of the canines exhibited. So it's not a smile. It's more of, where the teeth are coming out. And so when you see somebody smiling at you like that, watch out for a sucker punch. I saw that in Thailand during a kickboxing fight. And this one guy was wonderful. He was a great fighter. And throughout the whole match, he was smiling. He'd get kicked in the head. He'd go back and he'd come back and he's smiling, and then boom, 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 boom. So be careful of that toothy smile. So those are some of the signs that you can look for that would tell you that person's going to get aggressive.
How is fear used by psychopaths?
Well, most people are cowards. Yeah, people are. We're and so everybody wants to avoid confrontation. And especially because of, what you and Joe Atwell were discussing with the purpose of Christianity is to make us better cowards, more fearful. Look what the government is doing. It's constantly trying to scare people. So, we tend to be cowardly to begin with as a species, we're the same with the primates. They tend to, be frightened of things. All animals have a xenophobia, which is a survival instinct. You're supposed to be afraid of strange things because strange things might kill you, and your species wouldn't have survived as long as it did if it wasn't afraid of strange things. So we are the same way. It's a survival instinct to be afraid. I don't think you should ever not be completely afraid of things. Fear is a good thing to have. It's actually a survival mechanism because there's a disease called Urbach Vita, I believe it is. And the people that have this disease are not able to feel fear. And it seems to be a genetic condition, and they're born this way. And they have a life expectancy of about 18, 20 because they will engage in activities that would scare the shit out of you and me, but they don't feel the fear. And so they take risks that you and I would not take, and they kill themselves, So fear is a good thing, but it's a two-edged sword.
Isn't it too bad that it's not the psychopaths that weed themselves out by 18 or 20?
You wish, and they don't have the fear, and a lot of them probably do kill themselves accidentally,
Right. Well, that's true. Probably a lot of this, especially the lower rung psychopaths, street robbers, murderers, things like that.
Yeah.
How can we prevent? Let's see here. And you and I, we should probably tell the audience that you and I had discussed doing 2 episodes together because there's so much information here. So now, we're getting into the preventing various crimes by psychopaths. Why don't we just sort of dip into a few questions here, warm the audience up, and then next week we'll give them the rest of the the meat on defending against, and preventing crimes, defending against psychopaths, et cetera. So, again, the question: how can we prevent various crimes by psychopaths?
Most important thing is always, your awareness. A lot of the philosophies, the more legitimate spiritual pursuits, talk about developing awareness, and they make the mistake of doing an internal awareness, and that's good too. But more important is know what the hell is going on around you. Don't get distracted. There's a way of focusing with your eyes, and it's using the peripheral of your vision to detect things. And you have to be able to focus a little bit using that. And that way, when you walk down the street or when you drive a car or anything that you do, you have more of it like 180-degree idea of what's going on around you. With our focused society, with our the computers and the TV screens, we're always focused on the central point of our vision, where we're focusing straight in front of us and tend not to see the things around us. But there's a strategic and a tactical advantage to focusing, because it also seems to trigger our instincts when we use our peripheral vision. So if you're walking down the street, and it's the same thing that you did when you were talking about confronting those guys at the gang members when you were walking out the store, and previously when you were walking down the street, it's the heads up, it's the awareness. I'm telling people, it's a weird thing. I didn't believe it at first. Can simple awareness be like a superpower to repel psychopaths? Actually, yes, it can. It works like that, but you got to practice at it. It's not something that automatically comes to you. You have to read up a little bit about it. But being aware of your surroundings, keeping your head up, and your body language too is really important. Okay, you got to be solid on your feet. Your feet has to, hit with the heel, walk along the ridge, bounce off the ball of the foot. If you're grounded and you're solid, that makes all the difference in the world, and you dissuade most of the street crime, like you did. You could have been mugged twice. You could have been stabbed and shot. Who knows what could have happened to you? And you didn't. You're not a fifth-degree black belt, and you weren't carrying a Glock 17 at the time. So what did you have left? Right? You had your awareness, and that's what saved you. So the best technique: being aware of your surroundings and learning to focus, and then being able to look confident. You might be scared inside. Like I said before, fear is a survival mechanism. It's good that you're scared. But the difference between a coward and a hero is scared, but he works through it. He keeps on going. Yeah, I'm scared. I'm going to get mugged by these guys, but I'm still going to walk right in front of them and push my way through them. That's the difference. You were scared when you did that, right?
Oh, incredibly, But when I did it and approached them that way, I could see all of a sudden, I could see their predatory stance and getting ready to jump me. And then when I did that and came straight at them, looking in the eyes and everything, their whole their body language and everything suddenly began to shift. And then I could tell that they realized that, maybe we should, what happened is it planted all of these seeds of doubt in their heads about what they were about to do, and then they decided not to do it, because again, their risk factor, I'm assuming that they weighed the risk as too great,
Yeah. That calculation takes place instantly in their minds, right? Benefit ratio, benefit and risk.
And I literally just walked right up to him and said, excuse me, and said it in that sort of way, demanding, excuse me.
Yeah, that's the way to do it. So awareness, confidence, reading the body language, like we mentioned earlier, read the body language for aggressive. You knew that they were getting ready to jump you because of the body language.
Exactly.
Right? You read their body language. So those are the three characteristics right there: awareness, confidence, reading things.
And I think it was working in the poor neighborhoods back in the 90s with the LA Times in my early 20s that gave me that realization, because, we would have newer guys on the crew, and they would be scared to death to go into these neighborhoods. And they would, want to go work in these rich white neighborhoods and not make a dime, you know.
Yeah.
And it's like, you know, when they would start working with this, it's like, what do you mean you know, those are the best neighborhoods, those are the coolest people to work with, those are the ones that are going to give you dinner, you know, they're
Mhm.
the ones that are going to invite you into their house. And you know, but you know, gangs, it's like, well, just walk up to them and say hi.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, I've been all over the world, and I've been in like really bad places, like Bangkok, 4 o'clock in the morning in a bad part of town. I never was afraid. I was up in the Golden Triangle there, where I was staying in a village full of opium smugglers, and everybody walked around was carrying an AK-47 and a Beretta on the hip. I wasn't scared at all. These people weren't going to hurt me. You could tell. They were more kind and more caring than my own family has been to me. I felt better. I felt safer up in the headman's hut with an AK-47 than I ever felt at the family Thanksgiving dinner. So yeah, no, I'm on your side with that.
All right. Shall we pull the break here for the next episode and then get into home safety and all of the good stuff on the next one? Or do you want to hit one or two more?
I got to go to the bathroom, so I think maybe this would be a good time to break.
All right. So before I let you do that, what is the single most important concept that you want people to remember from part one of this interview?
Most important is think for yourself and be observant and be aware. That's it.
And Stefan, would you please give your website as well as the titles of your books?
The book is called The Art of Urban Survival, a Family Safety and Self-Defense Manual. There's no conspiracy theories in it, and there's nothing that anybody would need to be worried about in terms of politics or religion. It's basically
You sure the section on cops wouldn't...
trust me, even the cops would agree to everything.
Okay, all right, there you go.
They know themselves. Look, hey, they have daughters too, and if they get pulled over by some other cop in another state, they would be worried about the same things that you should be worried about. So, no, not even the section on law enforcement. There's nothing, because look, there's bad people everywhere in every profession, and you just have to understand that and take it into account. And by doing that, you just make sure that you're more careful. That's all. That's all it's advocating. You get pulled over by a cop, maybe he's a psychopath, maybe he's not, but you better treat him as though he was and don't give him an excuse to shoot you. Very simple. So, yeah, there's nothing really controversial. It's a Boy Scout manual for, street smarts and for people living in the big city. It's nothing to be afraid of. And anybody in the family could read it, and especially high school and college students should read it, because a lot of this stuff, us older adults, we've kind of learned, we learned our lesson after 20, 30 years of making those kind of mistakes. Thank goodness they weren't fatal in our case, but we still made mistakes. Younger guys need to learn this stuff so that they don't make a fatal mistake. So The Art of Urban Survival, it's on Kindle, it's on Amazon.com, it's on Smashwords, and it's on Lulu. My website is www. I guess everybody knows that by now, chinastrategies.com. That's one word. And it's got my other books on there. I've got another book on martial arts and Zen for the vision impaired called Blind Zen. If you have children and you're worried about stranger abduction or child molestation, I have two books, one for parents, one for kids, called The Little Warriors. And it's a way to teach your children street proofing, just like Art of Urban Survival is for adults. Little Warriors is for like small kids, just giving them enough information to be safe. Don't go into abandoned buildings, how to deal with dogs. There is no such thing as a good secret. Never keep secrets from your parents, how to dial 911, how to answer the phone when your parents aren't home if you're a latchkey kid. So there's a lot of, street safety in that book. My more commercial books are The 36 Strategies of Ancient China, Ancient, Cunning, Ruthless Strategies. If you want to know how a psychopath thinks, read that book, because that's the tactics that they use. And finally, excuse me, Chinese business etiquette, because of my time spent as a public relations and marketing consultant in China.
All right, and we'll wrap that up here, and I will see you for, I think, next week's show, probably maybe the week after, but it'll probably be next week.
Okay. Thank you, Jan.